got into wrestling because of the MMA initially. Like, I started watching MMA when I was pretty young. I want to say like 11, 12 years old. I didn't really start getting into it till I was like 13, 14. Um, and then, I started seeing all the top fighters at that time. It was just all wrestlers, GSP, the Matt Hughes, Randy Good, all those guys, like, um, all came from a wrestling background. So, in my mind, I was like, okay, if I ever want to do this, I'm definitely going to need to know how to wrestle. And then once I got into wrestling, I just became so obsessed with that. I kind of, I didn't forget about the MMA stuff, but I just was so engrossed in the wrestling aspect that I just focused on that for all my high school. And then once I graduated, I started branching out and training everything.
All right, man. Let's get right into it, man. Steve, let's start off with this pro debut, man. I want to start with that. How did you decide that you were ready to go pro?
It was basically, I just think, I mean, that's the main thing over here in New York. It just required 5 amateur MMA fights, and I had that, and that was kind of really just the main determining factor. But I think mentally for me, I've been waiting for a while, so I thought this was finally the time to make the switch.
What do you think of that? You have to have a certain amount of fights in New York to turn pro. Does that make sense to you?
Yes and no. It like if we look at it from like the most genuine perspective, I think it does make sense. As in, you want guys that have at least been through it a little bit. Like, in my time in the gym, personally, like I've seen many guys that say they want to be, world champ, this, that, whatever. They want to be everything. They lose their second amateur fight or their first amateur fight, and then their entire world's devastated. And now, they never fight again. It's like, well, good thing they took that amateur fight in shin pads before they got kicked upside the dome with no shin pads. So to that extent, if we're looking at it from a very, I think from that perspective, it does make sense. Uh, from my perspective, like for example, the last 3 fights, I didn't, I fought amateur pro rules, which is essentially just pro rules, except 3-minute rounds. So for me, it was there was no difference except I had shorter times, which I actually didn't like anyway. So um, to that extent, it really doesn't make sense. But for I think early on, for especially young guys that are unsure of whether or not they want to get into it, I think it does give them just like a good outlet to try it out and see if it's a good fit.
Do you recommend, people in the gym that have been training MMA for a while to just go take a amateur fight just to see how it feels?
Well, I wouldn't. I hate saying like just go do it, because it makes it seem like I don't put some thought into it, But I do. That's the thing. I really don't recommend fighting for anyone, quite frankly. I don't really recommend it unless I feel like it's something they actually genuinely care about. Like, I kind of tell everyone because we got a lot of guys that come in here, and they again like they want to be fighters, and at least they think they do. And they come up and they tell me that, and I'm pretty honest here because, like, essentially, from my experience, again, it's not the longest. I always defer to Ray, but from my experience, 9 times out of 10, the guys that end up actually fighting and fighting consistently are the guys that someone comes up to them and be like, "Hey, like, I'm assuming you want to fight," because their actions show it. Quite frankly, they come in every day, they're doing the right things, they're working hard. It's the guy that comes in telling me, "Hey, man, I'm about to be on that UFC wall right there." It's like, all right, man, guess I'm never seeing this guy again because they never show up. Like, really, it's just those guys. They show everything they need to on the first day most of the time.
That's so funny. I'm gonna be on that UFC wall.
Oh
That's
yeah, and then they
hilarious.
show up for a month and they realize, oh, this is really hard, and they stop.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize that. Like MMA training, like real MMA training, like a regular person, it's not recommended. That's
I
rough on
definitely,
the body.
yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I mean, I always tell everyone too, like, yeah, I wrestled in high school. Wrestling's hard. I do jujitsu. I'm a purple belt under Pete Drago's cell, who's a black belt under Matt Serra, and jujitsu's hard. Kickboxing, that's tough, man. I have a couple amateur kickboxing fights. That's not easy. Boxing's hard. Now you got to combine everything together, and you got to be able to do that consistently. Good luck, guys. Like, good luck, everyone involved. Godspeed, man. That's a tough one.
It is tough. And Drago, man, we haven't seen him in a while, man. What's the update on him?
Drago's the man. First of all, he's here. He's over here at Longo Weidman. He helps out all the guys. Like he does more than anything. He's just working his regular day job. Comes and teaches jujitsu when he can. Helps out the guys. Drago's just a good dude. He's always got a place here, and he's just again just super helpful to have around.
So yourself, you grew up wrestling, so it was a natural progression that you get into MMA. How did you end up just thinking about MMA and just like even fighting?
I guess I kind of got into wrestling because of MMA initially. Like, I started watching MMA when I was pretty young. I want to say like 11, 12 years old. I didn't really start getting into it until I was like 13, 14. Um, and then, I started seeing all the top fighters at that time. It was just all wrestlers, GSP, the Matt Hughes, Randy Good, all those guys, like, um, all came from a wrestling background. So, in my mind, I was like, okay, if I ever want to do this, I'm definitely going to need to know how to wrestle. And then once I got into wrestling, I just became so obsessed with that. I kind of, I didn't forget about the MMA stuff, but I just was so engrossed in the wrestling aspect that I just focused on that for all my high school. And then once I graduated, I started branching out and training everything.
Definitely. And how did you end up hooking up with the whole Cerro Longo crew?
That's an interesting. So I guess I went to Hofstra right over here. It's like literally 2 blocks away, right down the street from our academy here. So, I went to Hofstra, and I went to Hofstra. I never told my family this, but I initially went because I knew Ray Longo's academy was right down the street. So for me, it was just like, man, I do, my family wants me to go to school. I do want to make them happy, so I'm gonna go to school. But I want to be happy, and the only time I'm ever happy is when I'm training, wrestling, kick, whatever, something. So um, it was a bit of a calculated gamble, I guess. I guess it was just a gamble, if we're being honest. But I was like, you know what? I think I'm gonna give this New York thing a shot. Um, Moved down to Hofstra. Was starting to go to school here. Was walking to the academy here every day, and just trained. Been training here since basically.
What year was that?
So that started here 2014. So that's when I graduated high school, and then yeah, started over here at Hofstra in 2014.
2014, man. That's like some big things
Oh
was
man,
happening, man.
man, I don't even want to think about it anymore, dude. That's that feels like to me that feels like 2 weeks ago, but at the same time, like I would feel like an old man.
Well, in your profile it says you're the second best friend of Ray Longo. Who's the first?
Unfortunately, Matt Sarah, he definitely took claim to that.
Okay.
He saw my Instagram initially, it was number one, and then he took issue. And he made sure I put number two. I was like, all right, I think that's more than fair. So in fact, Ray, I think bumped me down to like number three or four pretty recently. But yeah, whatever. I'll keep number two for now.
Yeah, Ray seems like just a great human being, man. Just a fun guy to be around and a
Man.
legend of a corner. Everybody knows if you watch the UFC. And now for yourself, man, you had 5 fights as an amateur. What did you take away from those 5?
So I'll tell you, my first they were kind of spread out. My first two were back 2017, 2018, and then I took a bit of a break, and the rest were all last year, so the last three. And before that I was also kickboxing as well. But um that was just kind of those fights kind of helped me have the time to kind of develop mentally and just kind of mature. Again, I'm very lucky. um I'm just kind of, yeah, again, I'm just very blessed to have a guy like Ray Longo kind of more than just explaining the martial arts aspect to me, just the life aspects to it. And again, I think it makes fighting a significantly easier when you have that side of everything kind of squared away. So just I guess that's the main thing, just being able to develop mentally and mature enough to know what I want out of this, why I'm doing this. And again, I think a lot of guys tell me they want to be fighters, but if you ever ask them why, no one could give you a good answer. For me, I know why, so for me it's easy, you know.
Yeah, for sure. And when did you become the manager at Law MMA?
Oh man, so I started managing the gym. Actually, it's funny. Like I won't say funny. It's like right prior to COVID. So at the end of 2019, I started managing the gym, and then about 3 4 months in, that whole thing hit. So I'll say my managing time probably it looked pretty downhill, but I'm gonna say that was due to things I couldn't control. So, but luckily now everything's basically fully operational, kind of back to regular as it is. But yeah, no, it was very strange on the job training. I guess I
Yeah,
guess
definitely strange. And New York was hit pretty hard at that time
yeah.
too. So you probably was like, man, nothing can go right at this moment. What's going
Very,
on?
yeah, just a very weird time. I mean, look, I'll tell you, I was pretty. I guess again, just funny how things work out. I was very lucky in the sense that I live with Aljamain Sterling, who's obviously the champ. So he's my landlord. So he at that time he had a fight still booked with Corey Sandhagen, and obviously, at the beginning of the COVID, no one really understood what was going on. But that's really like once he was in negotiation with the UFC, talking about, look, man, it's like, I know there's a whole COVID thing going on. I know there's a whole worldwide pandemic, but there's a decent chance I'm gonna be fighting, to fight for the title next. Are you in or out? And we kind of had to make that decision. I'm just like, look, I'm in. Like, I got nothing else to do. So no, during that time, it was still very weird, but it was like, I think Aljo kind of put the troops together and we're like, look, man, like we got to go back with our lives to some extent. So I'm glad that he did.
For sure. And yeah, let's go back to the pro debut. You have an opponent. What do you think about the opponent? Is there any like research you go into doing against him, or you just go in and think like, I just need to focus on myself?
No, typically I like to, like, I do research for all the guys here. I like to just always scout some of the opponent. I don't say there's like a set thing that I'm gonna do, but I do like to just look at him, see some tendency, things like that. And for myself, I haven't really, to be fair with my opponent, I actually haven't really looked at him yet. But I'm very, again, I'm very confident at where I'm at right now, and I'm very, I feel very good. If the fight was this weekend, I feel like I could fight this weekend. But the fact that they're giving me 9 extra weeks to prepare, essentially, I think is criminal. I think it was a mistake on their part. So it is what it is. I'm just excited to go.
And also, you never know what's gonna happen. With these days, what I mean. The guy could be ready to fight now, but 2 weeks
nine
from
weeks.
now,
That
yeah.
absolutely no. I mean, look, for me again. That's why I do think the most important thing, like you said, was to just focus on myself. But if I can scout the opponent, awesome. But I don't live and die by that.
All right, man. Well, March 26th, man, you make your pro debut, Steve. I'm really anticipating what you can do as a professional. Thank you so much for the time, man.
I appreciate that so much, Sean. Thank you so much for having me, man. Seriously.